Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Janavallabha Girivaradhari. Gopi Janavallabha Girivaradhari. Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana. Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana. Jamunatira Vanachari. Jamunatira Vanachari. Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Shil Prabhupada ki jai, Gaur Bhaktivinoda ki jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayam Namaskritya Naram Chiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tto Jayam Udhirayat. Nashta Prayashabhatrishu Nityam Bhagavata Sevya Bhagavatit Shloke Bhaktir Bhavatin Nashtiki. Hare Krishna, dear devotees. We are reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 5, Chapter 6, the activities of Lord Rishabhadev, verse 1. So we'll start with the introduction. The summary. This chapter tells how Lord Rishabhadev left his body. He was not attached to his body even when it was being burned up in a forest fire. When the seed of fruitive activity is burned by the fire of knowledge, the spiritual properties and mystic powers are automatically manifest. Yet Bhakti Yoga is not affected by these mystic powers. An ordinary yogi is captivated by mystic powers and his progress checked. Therefore, a perfect yogi does not welcome them. Because the mind is restless and undependable, it must remain always under control. Even the mind of the advanced yogi, Saubhari, created such a disturbance that he lost his yogic mystic powers. Due to a restless mind, even a very advanced yogi can fall down. The mind is so restless that it induces even a perfect yogi to be controlled by the senses. Therefore, Lord Rishabhadev, for the instruction of all yogis, showed the process of quitting the body. While traveling in South India through the provinces of Karnataka, Konka, Venka, and Kutaka, Lord Rishabhadev arrived in the neighborhood of Kutakachala. Suddenly, there was a forest fire that burned the forest and Lord Rishabhadev's body to ashes. The pastimes of Lord Rishabhadev as a liberated soul were known by the king of Konka, Venka, and Kutaka. The king's name was Arhat. He later became captivated by the illusory energy, and in this condition, he set forth the basic principles of Jainism. Lord Rishabhadev set forth the principles of religion that can free one from material bondage. And he put an end to all kinds of atheistic activities. On this earth, the place known as Bharatavarsha was a very pious land because the Supreme Lord appeared there when he wanted to incarnate. Lord Rishabhadev neglected all the mystic powers for which the so-called yogis hanker. Because of the beauty of devotional service, devotees are not at all interested in so-called mystic power. The master of all yogic power, Lord Krishna, can exhibit all powers on behalf of his devotee. Devotional service is more valuable than yogic mystic powers. Devotees who are sometimes misled aspire for liberation and mystic powers. The Supreme Lord gives these devotees whatever they desire, but they cannot attain the most important function of devotional service. Devotional service to the Lord is guaranteed for those who do not desire liberation and mystic power. Text 1, Raja Uvacha, Na nunham bhagava atmaramanam yoga samirita jnana bharjita karma bijanam aishwaryani puna kleshadhani bhavitum arhanti yadrich chayopagatani. Raja Uvacha, King Parikshit inquired, not Nunam, indeed, Bhagavan, O most powerful Shukadeva Goswami, Atmaramanam, of pure devotees simply engaged in devotional service, Yoga Samirita, achieved by practice of yoga, Jnana, by knowledge, Avabharjita, burnt, Karma Bijanam, of those whose seeds are fruitive activities, Aishwaryani, the mystic powers, Puna, again, Kleshadhani, sources of distress, Bhavitrum, to become, Arhanti, are able, Yadrichaya, automatically, Upagathani, achieved, translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. King Parikshit asked Shukadeva Goswami, my dear Lord, for those who are completely pure in heart, knowledge is attained by the practice of Bhakti Yoga, and attachment for furtive activity is completely burned to ashes. For such people, the powers of mystic yoga automatically arise. They do not cause distress. Why then did Rishabhadev neglect them? Purport. A pure devotee is constantly engaged in the service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Whatever is necessary for the discharge of devotional service is automatically attained, though it may appear to be the result of mystic yoga power. Sometimes a yogi displays a little yogic power by manufacturing gold. A little quantity of gold captivates foolish people, and thus the yogi gets many followers who are willing to accept such a tiny person as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Such a yogi may also advertise himself as Bhagavan. However, a devotee does not have to exhibit such magical wonders. Without practicing the mystic yogic process, he achieves even greater opulence all over the world. Under the circumstances, Lord Rishabhadev refused to manifest mystic yogic perfections, and Maharaja Parikshit asked why he did not accept them, since for a devotee, they are not at all disturbing. A devotee is never distressed or satisfied by material opulence. His concern is how to please the Supreme Personality of Godhead. If by the grace of the Supreme Lord, a devotee achieves extraordinary opulence, he utilizes the opportunity for the Lord's service. He is not disturbed by the opulence. King Parikshit asked Shukadeva Goswami, "My dear Lord, for those who are completely pure in heart, knowledge is attained by the practice of bhakti yoga. An attachment for fruitive activity is completely burned to ashes. For such people, the powers of mystic yoga automatically arise. They do not cause distress. Why then did Rishabhadev neglect them? Mukam karati vachalam pangum langati grina kripa tamaham vande Shri Gurun Dinatarinam. Om Namo Bhagavate Narasimhaya Namaste Jasteja Virabir Bhavavat Shanakavachadamstra Karmashayan Randa Randa Tamo Grasa Grasa Om Svaha Bham Bhamatani Bushta Om Kshram." So first, I would like to go back to the summary of the chapter, where Srila Prabhupada says that at the end, devotees are sometimes misled. Devotees who are sometimes misled aspire for liberation and mystic powers, and the Supreme Lord gives these devotees whatever they desire, but they cannot attain the most important function of devotional service. So if we want mystic powers or liberation or anything material, Krishna may decide to give this, to fulfill these desires, but then we won't attain, as Srila Prabhupada says, they cannot attain the most important function of devotional service, and this is, we gain the Lord himself. In one commentary to Srimad Bhagavatam, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says that it is commentary on 9th canto, the story of Maharaja Ambarisha and Durvasa Muni. There in the conversation between Lord Narayan and Durvasa Muni, the Lord explains how dear are devotees to him. And he says that the devotees, because they don't want anything, including liberation, they are very dear to him. And he says, because they refuse liberation, then I forcefully give my heart to them. And this they accept. They accept my heart. And then they put my heart in their heart. So it becomes we become united in our hearts. And therefore, Krishna says, therefore, wherever devotee's mercy goes, my mercy also goes there. So in a sense, the preachers, the Madhyama devotees, they give mercy to the people, and wherever they decide to go, the mercy of Krishna goes there. And the Acharyas explain that the Lord doesn't interfere with the decision of the devotee. The devotee is it's his business to decide, and the Lord will follow where to direct the mercy. So the Supreme Lord is very pleased with this selfless devotional service, so much so that he gives himself. So this is the the most important function of devotional service. In Chaitanya Charitamrita, Lord Chaitanya says that Vasudeva Datta, he purchased me. I'm his property. With his devotional service, with his pure love, he bought me. And now he can, if he decides so, he can bring me to the market and he can sell me for any price. And so we cannot attain this most important function of devotional service if we aspire for anything material. And we know from the story of Dhruva Maharaj that Dhruva Maharaj is an example of devotee who aspired for something material, and he worshipped the Lord with this motivation in mind. But then when he saw the Lord, then he regretted. And in the purport, Srila Prabhupada explains, therefore, we should not worship the Lord with material motivation, because if we do so, we'll be regretful, just like Dhruva Maharaj was. But then it's interesting that Dhruva Maharaj attained both. So this is the extraordinary, amazing mercy of the all-merciful Supreme Lord. Again, the Acharyas describe the conversation between Dhruva and the Lord when the Lord gave darshan to Dhruva Maharaj. And Dhruva Maharaj said, I don't want anything material from you, my dear Lord. I'm just completely satisfied now by seeing you, by having your darshan. And then the Lord said, no, I will give whatever you wanted. I will fulfill your desire. Nobody worships me in vain. This was your desire, I'll fulfill your desire. And then Dhruva Maharaj says, yes, but you'll fulfill my stupid material desire, but you won't give me prema. And then the Lord replies, no, I will give you both prema and I'll fulfill your material desire. And we see also in 10th canto, when Krishna goes to Mathura, then he meets these two devotees after killing the washerman, the demonic washerman of Kamsa. Then Krishna meets two pure devotees, and he goes to the house of both of them simultaneously. And he gives blessings to these devotees, and the blessings they include a full range of sense gratification. Of course, they're pure devotees, so they won't be engaged in materialistic sense gratification. But he gives them all kinds of blessings, material blessings, and then at the end he says, and at the end of this life, you'll go back home to God. So sometimes Krishna does both, but generally we should be careful not to approach the Lord with material desires. Of course, if we do have material desires and we cannot help ourselves, then it is better to approach the Lord and not anyone else, not the demigods, not the demons, not powerful human beings. We should approach the Lord. And then the Lord, he would know how to treat our disease. Just like another story, the story of Kubja. Kubja approached the Lord, and her attraction to the Lord was not completely pure. It was mixed with material desire to enjoy the Lord. And still, Krishna did not reject her. Krishna was very, very kind, very gentle. He purified these material desires, and in other words, Krishna knows how to handle all types of devotees. So we should not hesitate to approach the Lord. We shouldn't think that he'll be judgmental, that he will be disgusted with us, that he will be He will punish us because we are not pure. He knows we're not pure, and still he loves us. Krishna loves us right now with all our impurities, because he can see through all these material designations. Okay. There was something else in this summary, but maybe I'll remember later. So here in this verse, the discussion is about the mystic powers and the control of the mind. There is a nice verse from 11th canto. Eshavai paramo yogo manasa sangrata smrita hridya gyatvan andvichan damyasya varvato muhun. Krishna explains to Uddhava that this is Eshavai paramo yoga. Parama yoga means the supreme yoga. Supreme yoga system, Krishna says, is just like an expert horseman desiring to tame a headstrong horse. First, lets the horse have his way for a moment, and then, pulling the reins, gradually places the horse on the desired path. Similarly, the supreme yoga process is that by which one can carefully observes the movements and the desires of the mind, and gradually brings them under full control. In other words, we are not advised to abruptly try to control the mind fully. First, we have to observe the mind. First of all, we have to become aware that we are something different from the mind, that we are not the mind. Of course, we know that, but theoretically. But we have to practice this also. And then when we observe the mind, because by observing the mind, then we gradually realize that we are not the mind. Because we see the movements of the mind, the desires of the mind are very often ridiculous. And they're like, the mind is like, you can compare the mind with a child, or with a, we have to live with a crazy roommate all the time, and we cannot do anything. We cannot kick him out. So gradually, by observing the mind, we become detached from the mind. This is the idea. One devotee, he was back in the day, he was spiritual master, and then he shared once that by his experience is that one of the reasons why devotees fall down is that they stop at one point. They stop to endeavor to discriminate between themselves and the mind. While chanting Hare Krishna, they stop this endeavor to control the mind. They just let the mind take over. We know this analogy from Bhagavad Gita. The senses are the horses, and then the reins are the mind, and then the intelligence is the charioteer, and then the soul is the observer. So we have to try to detach ourselves from the mind. Mind is the advocate of the senses, basically. The senses are feeding data, and the mind is the place where all this information from the senses is gathered together, and it is relished. The material and the spiritual mind is the place for relishing rasa. And this is the goal why we are existing. Everybody wants to taste different rasas. So the mind allows all this information, data from the senses to be combined and to be tasted. Therefore, a sexual pleasure is the greatest indulgence in the material world, because in Maya, because it engages forcefully all the senses simultaneously. And therefore we forget Krishna. This is the greatest problem with the sense enjoyment. It's not that Krishna is some kind of sharp moralist. He enforces some very strict moral rules, or the devotees, for that matter. The problem with sense enjoyment is that we forget Krishna, and we are supposed to remember Krishna. Smartavya satatam Vishnu, vismartavya najatuchit, sarva vidi nishadasyur, eteyor eva kinkara ha. All the rules and regulations of Shastra are meant to bring us to this point, to always remember Krishna. That means to be always engaged in positive, direct devotional service, to acquire taste, and to never forget him. And that means whatever we do, when we are not engaged directly in devotional service, whatever we do, we should see how it is connected to Krishna. Therefore, there are these descriptions in Bhagavad Gita, Vibhuti Yoga. Krishna describes how everything is expansion of his energy. Therefore, we have all these descriptions in Bhagavatam, 2nd, 3rd canto, of the universal form, 5th canto, because if we understand that everything is connected to Krishna, then we will never forget Krishna, because whatever we see, we will see as Krishna's energy. In Bhagavatam, there is interesting verse. Jalabharata explains to the spiritual science to Maharaja Hugana. And there he calls the mind Atmalingam, which means mind is the designation of the soul. Jalabharata says, the soul's designation, the mind, is the cause of all tribulations in the material world. As long as this fact is unknown to the conditioned living entity, he has to accept the miserable condition of the material body and wander within this universe in different positions. Because the mind is affected by disease, lamentation, illusion, attachment, greed, and enmity, it creates bondage and a false sense of intimacy within this material world. So this Atmalingam, this is the false designation of the soul. This is our false image, the mind. It's a very interesting situation. We're not what we think we are. And because it is divine energy, it is energy of the Lord. The mind is energy of Lord Aniruddha. Therefore, it looks that the mind has desire on its own, while all the time it is actually a perverted reflection of our own desires, pure desires in the spiritual world, where we have pure spiritual mind. So it's our perverted materialistic, so-called false identity is the mind. And it creates bondage and false sense of intimacy within this material world. And this false sense of intimacy is the biggest problem, because we think we belong here, and we think our most precious relations and emotions and desires are to be fulfilled here in this material atmosphere. There is another interesting verse from 10th canto. 10th canto? No, 9th canto. Katfanga Maharaj, when we always speak about Katvanga Maharaj as the person who, he's the example of somebody who surrendered to the Lord instantaneously. The gopis, the wives of the brahmanas in 10th canto, and Katvanga Maharaj. These are the celebrated examples. Usually for us it takes years, sometimes lifetimes, to surrender. So, but he surrendered completely straight away. So he said, Tesha maya rachiteshu sangam guneshu gandharva puropameshu rudham prakrityatmani vishvakartur bhavena hitva tamaham prapadye. Therefore, I should now give up my attachment for things created by the external energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. I should engage in thought of the Lord and should thus surrender unto Him. This material creation, having been created by the external energy of the Lord, is like an imaginary town visualized on a hill or in a forest. Every conditioned soul has a natural attraction and attachment for material things. But one must simply give up this attachment and surrender unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So it is recognized that it is a natural attraction and attachment to for material things. Just like in the previous verse by Jadu Bharata, it says, it creates bondage and false sense of intimacy within this material world. So that it is well known, the acharyas have recognized this. Still, one must simply give up this attachment and surrender unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So we may, there is a scope for procrastinating a bit to do this, but at one point, the moment will arrive in our lives when we have to take this step, to make this decision. And therefore, we should be ready and we should actually practice and exercise. There is this famous Bengali proverb, whatever sadhana, whatever mantra, sadhana one has been practicing, it will be tested at the moment of death. So, because our attention, if we think about our attention, the concentration of the consciousness, what is it? It is actually the deployment of consciousness. And this deployment of consciousness, it creates our reality, our present and future reality. Right now we are trying to focus our attention. I'm trying to concentrate on Bhagavatam, on whatever I'm trying to say, on Krishna. And you too are trying to focus. And there are so many things going on around us. But we make the conscious choice that I'm gonna ignore everything else, and I will focus on the transcendental sound. And this creates our reality. If we do this, then we'll be in the spiritual reality. Therefore, Bhagavatam says that at least while we are discussing Krishna's pastimes, at least in this period of time, we are freed from envy, from anger, from all these six great obstacles, sufferings of material existence. And the moment when we stop discussing Bhagavatam, then go back. So it is very important because we're talking about the mind, and the mind has to be focused somewhere. Because it's interesting, think about the mind. It is it originates from sattva guna. The intelligence is originally in rajas, and the false ego is originally in tamas. The mind can be peaceful only when it is in its natural environment, which is sattva guna. And sattva guna means it has to be focused. If it's distracted, if it goes here and there, then it will be very disturbed and frustrated. So therefore, attention, the deployment of consciousness. If I ask you, for example, what clothes you were wearing yesterday, or Well, maybe for the devotee, this is not such a big problem because yesterday we were wearing the same clothes as today. But okay, let's say what we have taken for breakfast yesterday. Then for a moment, we'll be not here, we'll be yesterday, we'll be present in the yesterday's environment because our attention, our focus will be there. So pickpocketers, they know this, and they use this very well to their advantage because they know the trick how to divert the attention of their victim. And they know when the attention is somewhere else, then you can do many things that are obvious, but the person won't pay attention because his mind is somewhere else. So in this way, they steal the wealth, the money of the person. And in the same way, Maya steals away our wealth of Krishna consciousness by diverting our attention. And this happens through the agency of the mind. So it is not so much a matter of locale, of physical place where we are present, but it is more where is our attention, where our consciousness is. Our condition right now is that we are engrossed in matter, and our consciousness flows naturally towards material things. We're naturally attracted. Just like in this verse, Maharaja Katwanga says, it's natural affection. It's false, but right now it's natural. And this follows from our false ego, from our false identity. As material, Srila Prabhupada defines the false ego in one purport as conception of material identity. So we're in our condition right now, we are like someone who became so engrossed in a false imaginary computer game or in a virtual reality. And he has chosen a avatar there, and then he indulged so much in this game that he completely forgot about his real identity and his real life. So much so, imagine that he has lost connection with his real family, with his real friends, and he became indulged in this imaginary false friendship family. You know, people nowadays, they invest money in the virtual reality. It's quite expensive to buy real estate there. And some devotees propose that we should, maybe some devotees have already done this, I don't know. We should already start having harinams and temples and preaching in these virtual worlds. Maybe, I don't know. But imagine this person, and this person is us actually. We lost connection with, he lost connection with his real family, though they are right there, sitting next to him. So now, if his family members, they want to actually talk to him, they have to go inside this virtual reality because he doesn't respond to their natural, normal way of communication. So they have to go inside this virtual reality, and there they can try to contact him there, and from there they have to tell him that he has a real identity outside of this virtual reality. It's not going to be easy for this person to believe them. And this is because he has lost all connection with the real world. And this is our situation. And the process of Krishna consciousness means we revive our true identity as Krishna's loving servants. And then we gradually remember who we really are. And Srila Prabhupada says that by reading Srimad Bhagavatam, we revive our eternal relationship with Krishna. That means there will be certain pastimes of Krishna. While reading those, we will be spontaneously attracted to them. And this may be an indication of our place in the spiritual world. And the mind cannot be, of course, controlled by force. The mind is controlled by something which is more subtle than the mind, and this is our desire. So if we purify our desire through the process of Krishna consciousness, then we can control the mind, because then we will naturally desire to serve the Lord, something that is actually beneficial for us. It brings pleasure to the Lord, and it's good for all other living entities. Our consciousness will naturally flow this way towards Krishna. And finally, we'll be freed of this terrible duality in our lives, that we are pulled towards naturally, this is the worst thing, we're naturally attracted to things that are actually harmful to us. It's a very precarious position. Finally, this will be over, and then whatever we desire will be spontaneously to please the Lord in different ways, in our all unique manner, but it will be all connected to Krishna. So in order to attain this, we have to convince our mind. Our mind should be convinced. Right now, we manage to convince our intelligence to a certain degree, but the mind is still rebellious. So we have to flood the mind with Krishna conscious topics, with Krishna Katha, and we should let the mind experience the higher taste, because that's another curious thing about the mind. The mind learns only by experience. Our intelligence may be convinced just by arguments, but this thing, the mind, it has to experience things. Krishna consciousness is the best thing. It brings the highest pleasure. Yeah, well, okay, that's theory. So far, I have experienced other types of pleasure. Well, sometimes Krishna consciousness also, but so the mind has to be convinced, truly convinced. Then the mind will become our friend. Right now, it is sometimes our friend, sometimes no, our enemy. So here, the discussion is about the mystic powers, and they are very intoxicating. Therefore, they are very dangerous. But even more intoxicating is realizing and gradually realizing our relationship with Krishna. Then everything else will start to appear trivial to us. And it is trivial, actually. It is just material. So this is the greatest adventure. Srila Prabhupada writes in one purport, the whole Vedic adventure is to turn the mind completely towards Krishna. The Vedic adventure. And Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, I am the adventure. So it's very interesting. Something to aspire for and to look forward, something, it's a worthwhile career. Thank you very much, dear devotees. If you have any comments or questions. Okay, then. Shishi Radha Damodara ki jai. Gita Nagari ki jai. Gaur Bhaktivinoda ki jai. Nitai Gaur Premanande Hari Hari Gaur. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Yes? Okay. Okay. The DT is grading school. Yeah. We do the DT grading school first or no? First. Oh, there is some more time for the. Yes, it's a little late. Oh, okay. Okay, please. Please. Sing. Hmm? Jai Prabhupada, Jai Prabhupada, Jai Prabhupada, Jai Jai Prabhupada, Jai Prabhupada, Jai Prabhupada, Jai Prabhupada, Shri Guru Sharaya Deva Shri Krishna Sing Puja.